Minority groups, especially African Americans and the Latino community, are notable targets of the criminal justice system, whether it be within the courts, the juvenile justice system, and especially the police, as we see all over social media and the news outlet. But where did it all start? Since the beginning of American history, society has portrayed these minority groups as convicted felons and overrepresented them over the centuries, which tends to stick with the law enforcement as they allow it to affect how they treat these minority groups, especially if they're low income living in the urban ghetto. Given the history on the relationship between police and African Americans, the police projected a threat and fear for Black Americans, which includes other minority groups such as Latinos and Asians. The Ferguson Police Department is just an example of how police are specifically only targeting minority groups, especially African Americans who come from low-income communities. One of their victims being Michael Brown, a teenage African American boy who was shot to death by Officer Darren Wilson. Brown lived in a community known to predominantly have African American civilians, which the Ferguson Police Department consistently patrolled and targeted. The Michael Brown shooting is only one example that has brought attention to police departments for mistreating these Black communities. But would there have been a different outcome if Michael Brown was white and came from a different socioeconomic status? For this research paper, I want to identify how race determines how you will be treated by the different criminal justice systems, such as policing, courts, and the juvenile justice system. Further in, I want to analyze how race and socioeconomic intersects when dealing with the criminal justice system. Some significant points I found when talking about race and policing is that despite the rights that were achieved due to the civil rights movement in the 1960s for people of color, there is evidence suggesting that African Americans and other minority groups have not yet escaped dehumanization from society, which since the earliest period of American history, and are still often treated and viewed as degrading. There is research suggesting that there is an implicit association between Black people and apes, which examines the implication in criminal justice terms. It was found that there is a mental association between Black people and apes remaining strong within white Americans, explaining how the association determines their cognitive processing and judgment assessments. Particularly, the research suggests that the Black Ape Association also involves there being a great endorsement of police violence against suspected Black civilians, therefore influencing their decisions of states to execute the Black defendants, which explains the abuse and violence against African Americans. A significant points I found regarding race and courts is that the penal system is a significant part of the American system, whether it be racially or social classification. Millions of people throughout the United States are convicted every year, and the vast majority only receive their sentences in lower level state courts. The majority of these defendants are a part of the Black community and the Latino community, with the minority being white Americans, making them disproportionately incarcerated in the United States. There has been research from political science and criminologists that confirms that the context in what a trial judge works, which can potentially influence their sentencing decisions. So basically what I understood from a research article is that now minority members, that judges from minority groups basically have influenced the majority group judges. So now, because there are minority group members within judges, it has changed the views that white American judges view these minority groups. So because they're a part of their workforce now. Regarding race and juvenile justice systems, I found in a research study that they examined the way criminalization of young children under the age of 12 may be the start of the racial overrepresentation. In the article, they mentioned how the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child was attempting to recommend a minimum age of 12, but now they are recommending a minimum age of at least 14 years old for juvenile justice jurisdiction, since there has been a notable targeting of young minority children from the actors of the criminal justice system. On October 2020, 28 states in the United States had decided to not have a minimum age law, which meant that to fulfill state requirements regarding competency to stand trial and capacity to willfully commit a crime applied to children of any age, allowing them to be prosecuted in a juvenile court. The other states still remained with a minimum age law that ranged from 6 to 12 years old. Due to the significant differences in the state laws regarding minimum age boundaries, it emerged a movement to keep children out of juvenile justice systems, since it targeted children from minority groups the majority of the time. Juvenile justice systems involvement for children under the age of 12 deeply demonstrated racial disproportionality for Black children. In 2018, based on the total cases for children under the age of 12, Black children made up 35%, even though Black youth only comprised to 15% of the child population. In comparison, white children made up 50% of the cases under the age of 12, and they were 75% of the child population incarcerated. This only continues to worsen for older side of Black minors, representing 34.7% of the juvenile cases over 12 years old. This doesn't only include Black children, but also the Hispanic/Latino community and Native American children. The role of intersectionality played within race and socioeconomic status is important, as it helps us understand the struggles marginalized communities have to experience. Understanding the role of intersectionality in this case can help communities develop more comprehensive policies, programs, and even promote equity. When it comes to race and socioeconomic status, intersectionality plays a significant role, as both factors are harshly discriminated by the criminal justice system, since they're seen as less and insignificant compared to the majority communities in the United States. In conclusion, race today is still a significant factor to today's inequalities, which includes African Americans, the Latino community, and other minority groups. The circumstances tends to worsen for other factors that intersect with race, such as socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, and even your gender to this day. I chose to discuss the intersectionality between race and socioeconomic status, as poverty and racism are still two considerable issues in the United States, disregarding the history that underwent. Minority groups have always been overrepresented since the start of American history due to their color. As centuries have gone by, slavery and segregation have tended to overcome and depart from society, but the inequality for these minority groups still has remained with the actors within the criminal justice system, as police officers treat minority groups unfairly and judges maintain biases towards racial groups. Socioeconomic status only worsens the situation as race is overlooked, but low-income minority groups are targeted by the justice system since society overrepresents them as criminals based on history and the lack of economic status.